David Campbell, Commissioner with the Crofting Commission. I've been a Commissioner now for almost 8 years. I'm coming to the end of my term. It's been an interesting role. It's a Commissioner for the Crofting Commission, but the role is not really always about crofting. It's about regulation, it's about governance and strategic thinking, which plays a big part in the running of the Crofting Commission. It doesn't always link to the activities of crofting. So some of the skills you need might not serve you well on the croft, but it will serve you well on the board of the Crofting Commission. So the role is a 4 days a month role. That days are quite often split through the month, so you might do 2 hours one day, 2 hours another day, 3 hours at an evening meeting another day. The board meeting is generally a day, and strategic meetings that we quite often have in conjunction with a board meeting, probably usually the following day, takes up 2 days. So your four days that you commit to also includes time for reading, studying, reviewing papers. It's time consuming. If you manage your time, it's not too time consuming, and it's quite enjoyable. The satisfaction that you're playing a small role in sustaining and hopefully improving a historical form of land tenure, unique to the Crofting counties. Some of the skills that are important for a Crofting Commissioner to have, so if people who are thinking of standing, considering standing for election in the spring, thinking of applying for my appointed position comes to an end in May, I think it's important that people understand the strategic nature of the work of being a Commissioner, the decision making, the policy setting. The last 2 years has been challenging for Commissioners. They've had to learn some have had to learn new skills. We communicate quite a lot by email. It's a good way to communicate between board meetings with each other. It's meant that some people have had to learn some IT skills, and particularly over the last 2 years when almost exclusively we've met through the medium of Teams, and that's a skill that many of the board didn't have 2 years ago, but now it works successfully. We conduct all our meetings online successfully. It's good use of time. For example, the Commissioner for Shetland, to come to Inverness for a board meeting, has to leave home about Tuesday and get home about Saturday for a one-day meeting. Now he has to make sure that he switches the computer on 5 minutes before the meeting starts, makes himself a cup of tea, sits down, takes part in the meeting, switches the computer off, and it's been a 2-hour process. That was, a 4-day process for him. 2-day process for the Commissioner from Orkney, could be a 2-day process for the Commissioner from the Western Isles. So basic IT skills are quite important, I think. It's something that people considering standing should evaluate, that they don't need to be IT experts, but a degree of proficiency in emailing, in opening and closing documents, saving files, and working VC type system, as in Teams or Zoom or whatever the chosen medium is. There is one strategic committee, the Audit and Finance Committee, which is the governance committee. It has a panel of 3 on the committee, and 3 commissioners, the Chief Executive, Head of Finance, External and Internal Audit. That committee is the only statutory committee that the Commission are required to run. From time to time there are short-term working groups where Commissioners can get involved with senior management in making changes to the scheme of development, for example, where the views of the board, the views of the senior management team are condensed into a short working group of maybe 3 or 4, 5, 6 people, and they will quite often come up with a policy proposal on the back of these committees. That tends to come to the board for approval. One of the real positives about having such a wide spread of regions that commissioners represent is crofting is different across the crofting counties. So crofting is crofting, but in each area, you might say, the Western Isles, Argyll, East Highlands, West Highlands, Orkney, Shetland, Caithness, crofting can be a little bit different from one area to the other. It means different things to different people, different areas. It also is undertaken in a different way in some areas than it is. It's still crofting, and it's still the same core element. But you know, in Caithness, for example, there's a lot of crofting, but very little common grazing. Orkney, common grazings is, you know, there's 3 or 4, I think, in total. So it's a different type of crofting. People croft on their croft. Whereas if you go to the Western Isles or the Western Seaboard, Northwest Highlands, there's big areas of common grazing, and that shared communal, historical communal work system is much more prevalent there. The decision making on regulatory processes, the regulatory applications that come to the Commission are about 85% decided by staff through a scheme of delegation. Parameters for each application process are set by the board in conjunction with the SMT. You know, collaboratively, you know, as part of the strategy days, you look at the, you know, terms of delegation, you know, the criteria that the delegated decision making needs to adhere to. The board itself, the board members themselves, get involved in what we call a Tier 3 process. So there's a 3-tier or there's a 4-tier process for decision making. Tier 1 is for the straightforward cases that caseworker can approve. Tier 2 is for slightly more complex cases where the caseworker and a couple of regulatory managers review and come to a decision. Tier 3 is where the board comes in. So at Tier 3, 3 commissioners sit with a couple of members of the senior management team, caseworker presenting the case, and they review the case, they consider it, they discuss the elements, and you know, they refer to the act and they make the decision. And then beyond Tier 3, for very contentious decisions on applications, it will go to the whole board, and the whole board will consider it in much the same way as the group of 3 consider it. These cases are rare. The whole board probably makes 2 or 3 decisions a year. Tier 3 is a rotating process, so 3 commissioners are on this month's Tier 3. It keeps rotating the commissioners round. It gives real challenge. The real challenge is, and that's where the senior management help is, because to get consistency of decision making when different people are making it can be quite challenging. But that's where the casework with commissioners and senior management works well, because the management are in all the casework, Tier 3, and they sit with one group of 3 commissioners this month and one group next month. So there's a bit of a balance there in decision making, and hopefully that helps the consistency of decision making, which is really important. So the Commission's role is to deliver the policy of the government of the day. We are primarily there to deliver the administration's vision for crofting, and we take that in its wider sense. Like the National Development Plan, we look at that, we see what the government wants to do, we see how we can do that through regulation and delivery. As part of that process, there is a framework in how we operate. That's where the relationship with Scottish Government comes in. The sponsor team that this non-departmental appellate body are linked to contact at government. They feed to us, we feed to them. When that relationship's working well, then the Commission is aligned to delivering that objectives. It's a real privilege to be a commissioner. That's one thing that I've always felt from day one. It's hard work. It can bring its trials and tribulations, but it is actually a real privilege to, you know, crofting has been around for quite a few hundred years, and certainly in a regulated form for 130 years and 135 years actually. And to be you know, to coming to the end of my term, to have been able to experience that is a real privilege, and it's something that's a privilege that people should recognise when they consider standing for election.